Well, President Trump lashing out against former White House Director of Communications Anthony Scaramucci in a tweet storm this morning that reads, quote, Anthony Scaramucci is a highly unstable nut job who was with other candidates in the primary who got shellacked and then unfortunately wheedled his way into my campaign. I barely knew him until his 11 days of gross incompetence made a fool of himself, bad TV, abused staff, got fired.
Trump went on to say he wrote a book, a very nice book about me just recently. Now the book is a lie. Said his wife was driving him crazy. Something big was happening with her, getting divorced. He was a mental wreck. We didn't want him around. Now fake news puts him on like he was my buddy. Joining us now to help us unpack all of these insults is Anthony Scaramucci himself, the founder of Skybridge Capital and the former White House Communications Director. Great to have you back on as always. Give us your initial reaction to this when you saw this, especially.
Initial reaction? You didn't put my tweet up there.
That's okay.
There, right? What was my tweet?
Yes, your tweet. Let's pull that up. Okay, so your tweet. I mean, are you used to this by now? I mean, but now it's like very public.
I'm totally used to it because this is unfortunately what's going on. Yeah, there's my tweet right there. I mean, come on. You left out of it that my wife is a complete and total civilian. Okay, she doesn't talk about him on television. She has no anything. I mean, she obviously doesn't like him. There's not many people that like the guy. So I mean, I don't know, whatever. But he's going after her now too. So you guys have to see what he's doing. Okay, this is a malicious bullying of individual citizens, which is a form of fascism, which, you have to call it out for what it is. So it's all good by me. He can continue tweeting at me. The world's crumbling around him. You got a 65% chance of going into recession. He's blown the China deal. He can't get along with any of his staff. He's had 75 people depart the White House since he fired me. And they hate his guts. Well, I would say 95% of them hate his guts, and 5% of them are like indifferent and running to hide. So all of that's fine, but this is the guy running the country, and he's running it by himself. So, I mean, you have to atone for what happened. I have to accept my responsibility. I guess the good news about the tweeting is that he confirmed the fact that I was there for 11 days, so I want to thank him for that. And then the other thing that he's also confirming is that I didn't have anything to do with him, apparently. So I guess I don't have to take that much responsibility for getting him elected, because there's a train wreck about to happen if we don't get smart here and figure out a way to remove the guy. So I'm hoping the Republicans will come to their senses, recognize that this sort of aberrant behavior has destroyed the social norms and the standards of the presidency, both here domestically but also in international relations. And I hope that they wisen up. We'll see if that happens.
So you're trying to take some steps to try to avoid that train wreck to which you allude. The tweets from President Trump came after you did this interview on CNN. You claim to be putting together this coalition of former cabinet members to speak out against President Trump as part of an apparent bid to find an alternate Republican candidate, a nominee in 2020. Elaborate on that for us.
No, let me just add some flesh to that. So since that interview, I've talked to many academics. I've talked to people at different think tanks. People know that he is completely and totally unstable. I mean, I'm not a shrink, so I'm not going to call him a borderline personality disorder and a narcissist and all that other stuff. But I'm just going to demonstrate and explain to you the patterns of behavior. So that bullying done of me was designed to shame me and then therefore shame others from speaking out truth to power about what he's really like as a human being. So you got a large group of people inside the White House, inside the cabinet, up on Capitol Hill, absolutely hate his guts. He knows it, I know it, and he's trying to prevent them from speaking out, so he's trying to eviscerate me on his Twitter feed. I don't really know if it's going to work or not. We'll know in the next couple of weeks because you guys are good journalists. You know from your White House sources that it's an unmitigated disaster, and responsible people that are American patriots have to figure out a way to fix it. So we're working on it. Sometime after Labor Day, there'll be a group of us that are willing to speak out and candidly address, and then just put an appropriate Surgeon General's warning label on the lunatic in chief and just say, okay, this is what we experienced. This is what he's really like. If you still want to vote for him, go ahead. But you got to be careful here, because you can't take 5 more years of this sort of nonsense. I mean, for sure we got a year and 3 months, but 4 years, that's going to be rough.
Help us understand, though, I mean, knowing all of this about him, maybe even going into the appointment that you had, what makes somebody in your position, even like a Tillerson, right, who was at first very much close with President Trump, and then through the experience of working for him, coming out just like you have now and speaking out so fervently against him, what makes somebody even at this point want to work for a president like this, knowing that every person who has worked for him has had these experiences and has basically turned once they've exited?
Well, listen, I put that in a picture. I showed on my Twitter feed a cartoon of people coming in and shaking his hand, and then as they go on the rotisserie, they get a knife in their back from him as they're exiting the door, and he lampastes them on Twitter. So, I mean, that's what he does. And so, again, there's 75 people that he's blown out. I got blown out the quickest, so I probably owe him a personal thanks of gratitude for that. But you're asking a very, very good question. One of the three things that come to mind: patriotism, wanting to serve the country. Number two, you think you can make a difference. Number three, and this is the most troublesome one about the whole thing, when you're one of the president's supporters, you pick and choose some of the things that he's saying, because he's spraying information out there like a shotgun. And so some of it is very racist. The stuff about the congresswomen, very racist. Some of it is evidence that he's not a racist. That would be the prison reform and the pardoning of the African-American grandmother and trying to get ASAP Rocky out of prison, things like that. So what he does is he shotgun sprays. And when you're a supporter, you pick and choose the things that you like. And a lot of us did that. And that's a little bit of an equivocation on the part of myself and super smart people. And I'm writing an op-ed tomorrow, which will be in the Washington Post, that elucidates what I did, how I did it, why I did it. And again, you know, I'm here to tell you I made a mistake. We can debate the timing of my mistake. We can debate how I got to the evolution of where I am. But I think it's important to call out what's going on for what it exactly is, and I intend to continue to do that.
So President Trump has been taking some credit in touting the strong economy and yet asking Fed Chair Jerome Powell to continue to cut rates. But according to a new NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 49% of voters approve of Trump's handling of the economy. This poll, though, was conducted before the 800-point slide on the Dow last week, the market volatility that we saw last week. Just how scared do you think people are in the White House at this point that a recession could impact negatively Trump's presidency?
Well, unfortunately, because of the president's personality and some of this like borderline stuff, I mean, he's got very thin ice underneath him. A lot of things he's done on the economy, frankly, I've agreed with. I'm happy to take you through those. I'm somebody that likes to call balls and strikes as I see them. So the delayering of the regulation, the letdown of the administrative state, or taking layers of that off as well, both very positive for the economy. The tax cut put the U.S. corporations in a more competitive situation versus the rest of the world. There's arguments about the depth of the tax cut. It didn't really help middle class and lower middle class workers, but you have experienced wage growth for those people as a result of the president's policy. So those things are positive. But again, what made me draw my conclusion, I was asked 3 or 4 weeks ago what would be a red line for me, is if he's disintegrating the social fabric of the country. That would be a red line. He wants to continue to do that, as evidenced by what he says and does at these rallies. And so I think that's creating a very negative atmosphere, which is going to contribute to the possibility of a recession in the second or third quarter of next year.
I guess many might wonder, you know, what took you so long to come out? I mean, clearly longer than the 11 days for which you were. What?
Maybe we could figure out how many mooches it took me to come out. We could do the calculation.
Sure, but that's a metric now.
I think it's very valid criticism. I own that. I'm not going to twist myself into a pretzel and say, well, blah, 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 and try to explain that. I can't. I'm a loyal person. I pick and chose what I liked about him. I unfortunately ignored a lot of the things that didn't make sense, as more of those things that didn't make sense crept into the things I liked about him. And when you looked at the scales of the two things, you said, oh my God, this is an unmitigated disaster. We better get out there as responsible Americans and tell people the truth. So we can definitely quibble about when I came out, why I came out, and I get all that. But the truth of the matter is, people are flawed, myself being among the most flawed. And I just have to accept that I probably made a mistake on the way in, and I probably miscalculated a lot of things. But I'm an investor and an entrepreneur. And what happens when you are an investor and an entrepreneur, when you're wrong about a position or you're wrong about a direction you're taking your business in, you have to be willing to admit the mistake, forgive yourself, adapt, and go forward in a different direction, which is exactly what I'm doing. And I just think it's really important and a civic responsibility now for people that work with him that know what he's really like to get out there and speak truth to power.
Do you regret working for him? Do you regret supporting him?
No, I don't regret working for him. I'm ambivalent about my earlier support for him because I think in a lot of ways he presented a advocacy for blue-collar people that were being ignored by the political establishment. And so for those reasons, and I write about those in my book, I think that that was a very good historic contribution that the president has made to the political zeitgeist. I don't regret working for him because I'm the product of the American dream. He became the American president. And I would tell anybody, young or old, anybody in between, if you have the opportunity to work for the American president, likelihood is that you will take it. Unfortunately, with this American president, you know, it wouldn't be a great career move because of that picture I put up a couple weeks ago with the, you know, the people going in and out getting knifed by the guy.
So let's talk about 2020. The pool of Democratic candidates is shrinking, but still a vast array of options at this point. Do you see any specific Democrat that you think can take on President Trump most effectively?
So I'm not super versed on their side of things. You know, obviously the person I know from the media the most is Vice President Biden. I've met him a few times. Frankly, really haven't met the other people, so I don't really have a good read on them. But what I do have a good read on is my party. And what I would tell people that are thinking about running in 2024, I think now is really the time to step up, because what are you going to do in 2024? You're going to have whistled past the graveyard between now and then, and you're going to say, oh, well, I knew Trump was nuts, but I was too afraid of Trump. Look at how he outs people on his Twitter feed, and I got scared. You can't be scared to be the president of the United States. So I would encourage people in my party, the way Ronald Reagan, primary Jerry Ford, I would say get after it, make your points known now. Let's try to re-engineer and reestablish where the Republican Party needs to go. And I think we got to do that ASAP, because otherwise this is a cult of personality, and he's out of office at the end of 2024, and you're going to have a party in tatters.
What do you think from the pool that you've seen inside the Republican Party? Is there anybody that you have your eye on that you think should step up to the plate?
A little bit too early. You know, we're after Labor Day. Hopefully you'll invite me back and you'll ask me that question. I can give a more specific answer. And you know, I'm doing a couple of different things in dual tracks. We're organizing a group of people to at least put the Surgeon General's warning label on the president. And then the secondary thing that we're going to do is hopefully identify a few people that are willing to primary challenge him, which I think is very necessary for this party's survival. And once we've got a read on who's willing to do that, then I can speak more candidly.
So you said in a recent interview with Vanity Fair that you thought lagging poll numbers would cause President Trump so much humiliation that he wouldn't even want to see himself lose to a Democratic nominee in 2020. You predicted he would drop out, in fact, by March of 2020. Do you really think bad poll numbers would cause him to drop out, and why March specifically?
Oh, you know, I picked March because there's a historical context to March. March of 1968, Lyndon Johnson decided, after the full-blown wreckage and the protests of the Vietnam War, remember Eugene McCarthy entered the primary race and started to get traction with young people. He knew that the party was going to be splintered and divided, and he knew that the Republicans were galvanizing around Richard Nixon. And so he sort of read the tea leaves that he was going to lose re-election as an incumbent. He didn't want to face that humiliation. And so I think President Trump, I mean, he's got the self-esteem of a pigeon. I mean, you just have to just think about the way he's coming at fellow citizens on Twitter. I feel bad for the First Lady because she has this whole anti-bullying program going on, but the biggest bully in the country happens to be somebody she's married to. So I'm sure she's horrified by that. And, you know, it's just ridiculous. So that level of low self-esteem, as demonstrated by his bullying, that is, the poll numbers are going to be a disaster, and he'll cut and run like Lyndon Johnson did in March of 1968. Now, people think I'm crazy. but I'm an entrepreneur. And so entrepreneurs have a tendency to curve the universe towards the reality that they see. Let's see what happens. I'm a pretty well organized guy, pretty good at putting things together. Let's see if we can build a coalition of willing people to express truth and honesty, which I believe is their patriotic duty. Let's see if we can get a couple of up-and-coming, experienced, aspirant politicians to declare themselves. And I think even if they don't win in 2020, that'll increase their odds in 2024.
Well, I've been at Cheddar long enough. You've been a friend of Cheddar's for a long time. I was here when you predicted that President Trump would win, or that Donald Trump would win. What?
No, it was the third week of October. You could go back to the tape. We were in my office.
Yeah.
I predicted he was going to win. And if you remember, I'm a pretty objective guy. I'm a markets guy. When I say I'm pretty objective, most people are just pretty objective because we have our emotional biases and our personal history. And so filtering through all of that stuff and trying to be as objective as possible, I saw him winning in 2016. If they run somebody like Elizabeth Warren, I think the odds are that he will win if he stays as the nominee. If they run somebody that's a little bit more moderate than Elizabeth Warren, I think the poll numbers that you're seeing right now in the swing states, just go take a look at the numbers in the swing states. I mean, it is really rough on the president. Down 26. And that's not a typo in New Hampshire, as an example.
That's right.
Down minus 12 nationally versus any Democratic candidate. So just imagine a moderate one that Republicans can hold their noses and vote for. The guy's going to get routed, and so we'll see. But there's a lot of time between now and then, and there's a lot more crazy to come. I mean, I'm sure this won't be the last crazy, vicious attack on an individual citizen. Trust me. More will be coming, and I think people are tired of it. They have Trump fatigue syndrome.
Right. Well, you are certainly welcome to come back on, and the invitation is always open. Thank you so much for your time again, Anthony Scaramucci, of course, the founder of Skybridge Capital and the former.
Can I say one last thing?
Yeah,
you got
of course.
a lot of people watching this, okay? So this is a message to young people. Don't ever let yourself be bullied by anybody, not the president or anybody, okay? Stick up for yourself. At the end of the day, bullies are typically very weak-minded people, and stand with your friends, and you will defeat a bully.
All right. Thanks again, Anthony Scaramucci. A prudent message for all. Thanks so much. Thank you.